All right, so the Harden Volume 7 has garnered quite a bit of attention recently, not only for its looks, but also for its function, kind of what it can do and the design of it and how it wraps around your foot. So let's see why it was designed this way and kind of why James Harden is playing them and why maybe you'd want to as well. Here we go. Now, first thing I'll say about the uppers of the Harden Volume 7, and I might be in the extreme minority, but I kind of like them. I think they look pretty slick, and their function is very good. They do a lot of things very well, and they've borrowed a lot of designs from other Adidas basketball shoes in the very recent past, and put those designs in a package that make the Harden Volume 7 a very good shoe for very violent movers. And we look at the specific layers of the uppers. Number one, you get this real kind of sheen layer here in the forefoot, and then right under it is this kind of almost like it's a football shoulder pad type material, like the underneath side of a football pad. It is very thick, and then it has all this stitching in it, which does give a ton of containment. As you can see, it gets thin and then it broadens out here in the rear foot to really envelop the foot. Then under that is a booty liner, which is very thin underneath in the inferior rear foot, and then it gets a lot tighter and bulkier as it comes up over top of your foot, kind of where you'd lace the laces down. And what I like about this booty liner versus other booty liners like the Trae Young 1 or 2 is that this actually has this little neoprene right under the lace line, so it gives you a little more compression there, a little bit more feeling of bulk, but also a lot more comfort. And what I noticed about the lockdown in these is because these are kind of quasi outriggers, but they are stitched into the most top layer of the outside of the uppers, as well as all the way underneath into the bottom layer, is that it sucks down these shoulder pads all the way over your foot. It almost feels like you have armored protection over the top of your foot. Then you got that really nice comfy and kind of compressive booty liner that goes over there. And I really think for a booty liner shoe, these are number one, the most containing, number two, most comfortable, but number three, the most functional. I feel like in the Volume 7, you're actually getting a booty liner that functions the way a booty liner should, giving you a lot of degrees of freedom kind of within the shoe, but also an outer layer of the shoe that gives you more support and more confidence kind of going into the paint and getting stepped and trampled on. But the craziest part of the uppers of the Volume 7 is their breathability, and they look like they would not breathe one bit whatsoever. However, on the breathability test, they only rose 141.5 degrees and they cooled 95.6 degrees after 30 seconds. That is better than a lot of other shoes I've tested that do not have the bulk and the protection that these do. And I think a lot of that has to do with, number one, there is Boost in the midsole, and Boost does not hold on to heat very well. It is a very heat stable foam, so the bottom of the shoe is not holding on to as much heat. And the uppers just really let go of heat a lot quicker than some other shoes. So it is very interesting that these are such a containing shoe and have so many layers, but also allow a lot of efficient airflow. It is a real feat of engineering on multiple different levels. On the upper durability test, the Dremel 10-second tie grit sandpaper, I mean, the Dremel does wash off that real waxy sheen layer. However, it does not get through even this top drag layer. Plus, you do have outsole tread that comes up over it. So someone that's dragging or sliding, even on a super gritty outdoor court, I think you're gonna be just fine. Now, getting into the midsole teardown, I know there was some question of where the Boost ended and the Light Strike began. This is a pretty integrated type system. You got Boost here in the heel and then Light Strike that comes all the way up here into the mid part of the heel. Now on the bottom here, you do get a pretty long X-plated shank that goes all the way up into the forefoot, as well as pretty far into the rear foot here. However, because it is bottom loaded underneath of all that Boost, you're not gonna feel it in the heel. It's not uncomfortable whatsoever. However, it does give the shoe a pretty decent launch, and it protects all that Light Strike foam underneath of it from bottoming out as fast, because it gives so much more stress shielding and such a larger surface area of stress shielding versus some other Light Strike products where it's just allowed to kind of bend and crease all over the place. And so if you look at the Harden Volume 7 on the single leg jump height test, 21 centimeters, which is kind of right up there with some of the more elite shoes I've tested this year. Did not really expect that, being Boost in the heel, Light Strike in the forefoot. Light Strike's usually okay, but it's the shank, it's that bottom loaded shank and that leaflet in the forefoot that's doing the bulk of the work there. Because if you look at it on the bounce height test comparatively, 33.5 centimeters in the heel versus 31.5 centimeters in the forefoot. Now that is pretty standard from Light Strike recently that I've been getting on the bounce height test. However, in the heel, 33.5 centimeters of Boost foam bounce height. Did not expect that, as usually Boost foam is more known for its shock absorption. But on that test, it actually did get up a little bit more, making me think this might be a little bit more of a tuned bounce foam, maybe a little bit more elastic. So we'll see in the future if more bounce foams actually start to get higher and higher on that bounce height test as Adidas comes out with more and more Boost basketball shoes in the future. Now getting into the outsole tread of the Volume 7, this is where I really had a ton of high hopes for them, and they really did not disappoint. You get a radial pattern centered here in the heel going all the way up into the forefoot, and then two pods of herringbone traction in the forefoot, a little bit off offset there. And what this does is, number one, gives you a ton of traction. If you're trying to make hard stops in the y-axis or x-axis, these things just come to a screeching halt. Now, what I noticed is I actually played in these outdoors first and indoors second. I noticed that these things did pick up a little bit of dirt on the outside courts. However, I did not need to do anything to them. Maybe after 2-3 minutes on an indoor court, they became a super tacky shoe just kind of all on their own. On outdoor courts, they did fine, just like all other Harden shoes did. However, on the indoor courts, the 7s, quite a bit of a leap up from the 6s in terms of traction and grip on the indoor hardwood courts. Something I really like to see, because the Volume 6s were awesome outdoors. It was just indoors where they just had a little bit more of a clunky traction, not as much grab, whereas these ones just will pretty much grab anything. And if you look at the speed ratio of the Volume 7s, they come in at 1.79, which honestly is not the greatest. It's because the shoe is so heavy. However, for someone that has very heavy and violent footwork and someone that can really put a lot of energy into them, you're gonna get a lot back. So I'd say these can be extremely fast shoes if you are putting a lot into them, or if you're somebody like James Harden that's putting just a ton of force into the shoe. So I think it depends what kind of player you are versus what they're gonna do for you. Now, on the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, not even a millimeter damage on a 2mm tread depth. I mean, for outdoors or indoor play, I think these are phenomenal. They play exceptionally well outdoors, and I think they'll last exceptionally well outdoors as well. But getting into the most confusing part of the Harden Volume 7s, their fit. I thought these were gonna be the most constricting and annoying shoes. However, narrow, medium, wide foot, they can just go true to size. They do taper so hard in the distal forefoot. So if you are someone with a bunion or Taylor's bunion, probably not gonna be the best thing for you. However, they do break in very nice, and because of how they tie down, because of how the uppers envelop over top of you, they will break in for different foot types. It's just they look like they're so narrow in the forefoot. However, when you look at them from top down, they actually do have a pretty generous width in the midfoot. And as with all boost type shoes, somebody with heel pain, arch pain are gonna do just fine in these. That really long and broad shank is gonna hold that arch up on these pretty well. Somebody with forefoot pain, I probably still would be putting an orthotic in these. Yeah, it does have that plate that goes all the way into the forefoot, but light strike in general, I'd say from the top down might start bottoming. So I'd say throw an orthotic in them. And for a shoe that is a booty liner or a one-piece tongue, this is the best one you could put an orthotic in on the market right now. But getting into the all-important playability of the Harden Volume 7 and why I think James Harden is such a good match for this shoe, and it's because the harder and more heavy your footwork is, the more you put into the shoe, the more it's gonna give back to you. James Harden is so good at creating space for himself and so good at making really big defenders just absolutely lose their minds on the court. And so I think these are the perfect tool to do that in. Not only do they come to a screeching halt and give so much grip from so many different angles, but the containment in the uppers, really doing any type of footwork, even if you're really off center, off axis, if you're moving side to side or front to back, or if you're even trying to get into the air pretty easily, these are really gonna be great. Number two, because these do so well in the paint, kind of containing the foot, protecting your foot, you can get some really fast, quick footwork and kind of get yourself out of some really bad and crowded situations in these. Because like the Trae Young 1 and 2, they have all those degrees of freedom that an elastic booty liner will give you, but unlike the Trae Young 1 and 2, they also have the containment that gives you the confidence for multiple different foot types, or the confidence if you are just barreling down the court to come to a dead stop and know that shoe's not gonna buckle, or that booty liner is not gonna allow your ankle to roll over. And so for someone like James Harden, who makes a living off of beating you with his feet, these are just a perfect companion. But like I said, if you are someone on the lighter end of the spectrum or someone that likes a lighter type shoe, you're not gonna like these. They do feel a little bit bottom heavy because they have all this paneling around them. They just feel very enveloping and very bulky. However, if you are somebody who is a little bit bigger, who has very bulky legs, someone like me, I found these to be just as nimble as anything else because they were giving me so much back in return. They weren't like the TRC Blaze court where I could just kind of float all the way down the court and just feel really light underfoot, but they did give me the confidence to give the maximum that I could into the shoe, and I didn't feel like I was gonna roll over or anything was gonna happen to me. So I felt like my game got better because I just felt more confident to do more things in them versus a shoe that's gonna give a lot more in return to you. And I know the Volume 7s have gotten a lot of screen time, both good and bad. People that love their aesthetic, people that hate the way they look, you know, kind of all different opinions. So I'd love to hear yours. Kind of, are you going for the 7s? Are you stocking up on 6s or just going with something completely different? I will say, completely surprised. These are one of my favorite shoes of the year, easily. So I'd love to hear your opinion down below. And if you want to see the other sibling to the Harden Volume 7, a shoe I think it took a lot of design inspiration from, the Trae Young 2 going to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in the next one.